All right, so the key problems that we wish to address today is that our state has a high infant mortality rate and a low vaccination rate. As a result, vaccine-preventable diseases are on the rise. Vaccines will, of course, aid in preventing infant mortality. I shouldn't need to convince you on the benefits of vaccines. If I do, one study estimated that over this 20-year time span, vaccines have prevented 322 million illnesses, 21 million hospitalizations, 732,000 premature deaths, and also saved the healthcare system over $400 billion. Vaccine preventable diseases are occurring entirely too often. Of course, if you ask me, once is too often, but anyways. Thus far this year, the state has had several cases of vaccine preventable diseases, 35 of H flu, 18 of hepatitis, over 55,000 of the flu. Let's see, 3 of mumps, 52 of pertussis, 37 of varicella. And like I said, all of these could potentially be 0. So making things worse, the available data suggests that over the course of the last couple of decades, they've become much more common. The vaccine preventable diseases, that is. From 1997 to 2011, calculate this out, H flu is about 10 times more common, hepatitis B about 6 times more common, mumps has reappeared after being eliminated in the state, pertussis is about 5 times more common, influenza about 18.5 times. So why is this happening? Well, firstly, parents are misinformed. Bad information causes parents to be afraid of vaccines, causes them not to vaccinate their kids. Most states, Missouri included, do allow some exemptions to the rules for vaccination. The number of these exemptions has been growing in recent years. As a result, fewer kids get vaccinated, more kids get exposed to these conditions. So in people who obtain such exemptions, the risk of measles is 35 times higher, the risk of pertussis is 6 times higher. But states aren't required to give these exemptions. States can refuse to grant these, they can create strict criteria for granting these, and the more difficult the exemptions are, the less likely a parent is going to get them, the more likely the kid will be vaccinated. And this gives us a good strategy for improving vaccination rates in the state. So, as to what the law is in this area, there's been several U.S. Supreme Court decisions that have ruled in favor of the state's authority to require vaccination, at least in certain situations, outbreaks, schools, certain jobs, military, etc. Children have to be immunized before going to public schools, and the government can require that kids be vaccinated over the religious objections of their parents in certain situations. In at least some situations, refusing to vaccinate can be considered child neglect. And importantly for my proposal that is coming, while states may allow religious exemptions, they are not required. The laws of our state allow the Department of Health to act to control infectious disease and to establish regulations within the guidelines of the CDC. Vaccination is required for daycare and school, and exemptions are the only way around it. State law allows exemptions on medical or religious grounds. The medical exemptions require a licensed physician to sign off on it. They have to certify that vaccination would be dangerous, or that the child already has the disease or is already immune to the disease. Religious exemptions, however, are far easier to obtain. Only one parent needs to object in writing. They just have to state in writing that they believe that a vaccination violates their religious beliefs. And this, of course, makes the beliefs easy to the exemptions easy to obtain. So there's nothing to ask what religion you belong to, nothing to ask if your religion actually objects to vaccination, nothing about what the other parent's opinion is, just one parent writing in and saying, yeah, religion is against it. If an outbreak does occur, schools must exclude unvaccinated students and must follow the guidelines of local authorities. So as our goal is to reduce vaccine preventable disease, the primary means of evaluating it is the incidence and mortality from vaccine preventable diseases. We can compare our state before and after making any such changes, or we can compare our state to other states with different policies and see how we do. On the legal and ethical issues side, there are several issues that could be raised in such a debate, and in my opinion, they largely come down to dealing with personal choices and how those choices affect other people. While a mentally competent, properly informed adult generally has the right to make questionable choices for themselves, provided they only hurt themselves, that's not what we're usually talking about here. We're usually talking about one person making a decision for their child. It's not you that suffers the consequence of not vaccinating, it's someone else. It's your kid. And that raises a whole host of other ethical issues. You have the right to make a questionable decision for yourself, not for another person, in my opinion. But some parents will respond with the notion that they can do whatever they want, but kids aren't property. They're people that have rights of their own, including a right to good health. And while we do generally give parents a fair latitude in making decisions for the kids, once it comes to decisions that actually harm the kid, there has to be some kind of prevention for that. Some people will cite their religion rights as noted with the exemption, but even if we grant that religious exemptions would be valid for you, once again, you're making the decision for someone else. You're making the decision for someone who isn't old enough to even understand religious beliefs, much less evaluate whether those beliefs oppose vaccination. And it's one thing if you want to die for your religion, but if you want somebody else to die for your religion, well, my response to that involves phrases that I probably shouldn't use in this video. So even if we ignore the whole issue about parent versus child, it still goes beyond that, because these are infectious diseases that can spread to other people's children, other adults, and so on. You're not just, even if just hurting your child is somehow acceptable, it goes beyond that. You potentially hurt other people. Another issue related to parental choice in such matters is that what the law requires and medical ethics requires, it isn't just consent, it's informed consent. And so many parents out there are making decisions based on misinformation. And, well, if you ask me, you only make a certain decision because somebody lied to you. That's not a valid choice. That's not informed consent. All the misinformation out there, that isn't supporting free choice. That's interfering with it. Some economic issues can be evaluated by things like cost-benefit analysis and seeing if there's a reduction in healthcare costs following increased vaccine rates. So there's several options that we could potentially choose from. We could keep things as they are. We could eliminate non-medical exemptions from vaccination entirely, which I think is the best course of action and the thing that was most likely to increase vaccination rates. People would likely object on their parental rights grounds, on religious freedom grounds, and so on. Alternatively, we could still allow non-medical exemptions, but make them harder. For example, if you're going to claim a religious exemption, maybe we could require that you bring in a statement signed by a priest that says your religion objects to vaccination, in the same way that when you get a medical exemption, you have to get a statement from a doctor. This isn't as extreme as total elimination, and as such, probably wouldn't be as effective. So my recommendation is the elimination of all non-medical exemptions to vaccination. Medical exemptions must remain to allow for the health of children who have a legitimate medical reason not to vaccinate. If we just held to the status quo, well, that's not doing good enough. The vaccine rates are already terribly low, and just keeping things the same isn't going to help. Removal of religious exemptions, however, in my opinion, is okay. Firstly, let's be honest, there is no religion that has scripture that says thou shalt not vaccinate. People are just using religion as an excuse to do what they want. Even if we had genuine religious belief, once again, there's the issue of you making a decision for yourself versus someone else. Your religious freedom doesn't extend to being able to kill your child. If you have a religion that requires the unnecessary death of children, well, I don't see why your religion deserves any respect. Making exemptions hard to obtain would help somewhat, but not as much, because some exemptions can still be available. Under a system of requiring religious leaders to sign off on exemptions, well, there are already some doctors who make a habit out of selling medical exemptions. I could see some religious leaders doing the same thing. So to me, completely removing the religious exemption altogether is the most effective call, and both within the bounds of the law and what medical ethics allows us to do. The main limitations are the challenges we've already discussed: objections from religious freedom, objections from parental rights. Maybe it ends up being politically unpopular, but, well, a politician is more concerned with their popularity than the health of children. I don't see how they have any business being in office. So my conclusion is, let's get rid of all non-medical exemptions. Thank you. Here's my references.